Imagine a world where your entire existence, from the moment you draw your first breath to the second your heart stops beating, is facilitated, monitored, and built by a single corporation. This isn't the plot of a dystopian cyberpunk novel or a cautionary tale from a science fiction film. It is the lived reality for 50 million people in South Korea. We call it the Republic of Samsung. To the Western world, the name Samsung evokes images of sleek smartphones, high-definition televisions, and perhaps a reliable refrigerator. But the blue logo you see on your phone is merely the tip of a massive underwater glacier that anchors the entire economy of a sovereign nation. In South Korea, Samsung is the air that people breathe. It is the architect of their homes, the guardian of their health, the insurer of their lives, and even the manufacturer of the weapons that defend their borders. When a company accounts for nearly 20% of a nation's entire gross domestic product, it ceases to be just a business and begins to function as a state within a state. This is the terrifying and fascinating story of how a small shop selling dried fish and noodles evolved into a global titan that owns the destiny of a country, and what happens when a single family becomes more powerful than the government itself. The story begins in 1938 with a man named Lee Byung-chul, who started a modest trading company with 40 employees. At the time, Korea was under Japanese colonial rule and was one of the poorest regions on Earth. Lee's early business dealt in groceries, drying fish, and producing its own noodles. The name Samsung literally means 3 stars, representing something big, numerous, and powerful, intended to shine eternally like stars in the sky. It was a prophetic choice. Following the devastation of the Korean War in the early 1950s, the South Korean government faced a monumental task, rebuilding a shattered nation from the ashes. They turned to a handful of ambitious entrepreneurs, offering them massive loans, protection from foreign competition, and total political support. This gave birth to the chaebol system, massive, family-run conglomerates that were effectively hand-fed by the state to drive industrialization. Samsung was the crown jewel of this project. Under Lee's leadership, the company aggressively expanded into textiles, sugar, and insurance, essentially monopolizing every basic necessity of a recovering population. By the time the 1960s rolled around, the symbiotic relationship between the Samsung family and the South Korean presidency was so deeply entrenched that the company's success became synonymous with the nation's survival. If you think Samsung is just an electronics company, you are missing the most incredible parts of their portfolio. While you are using a Samsung phone to browse the internet, you might be standing in a building constructed by Samsung C&T, the same division that built the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest structure ever made by human hands. As you look out toward the ocean, you might see the world's largest cargo ships being assembled at Samsung Heavy Industries, which operates one of the most technologically advanced shipyards on the planet. And if you look toward the horizon, where the North Korean border lies, you will find the K9 Thunder, a massive, self-propelled howitzer that is the backbone of the South Korean military, built, designed, and sold by Samsung's former defense wing. They don't just build the world, they protect it. This diversification is what makes the scale of the company feel so immense. Most global corporations specialize in 1 or 2 sectors, but Samsung operates like a sovereign ecosystem. They have their own hospitals, like the Samsung Medical Center, which is widely considered the best in the country. They have their own theme parks, like Everland, which is South Korea's answer to Disneyland. They have their own life insurance wing, their own credit card company, and even their own fashion brands. In South Korea, a citizen can be born in a Samsung hospital, grow up living in a Samsung-branded apartment complex, attend a Samsung-affiliated university, spend their weekends at a Samsung resort, and eventually be buried in a funeral home managed by Samsung. The turning point that transformed Samsung from a regional giant into a global hegemon occurred in 1993, during what is now known as the Frankfurt Declaration. The founder's son, Lee Kun-hee, had taken the reins and was disgusted by the company's reputation for producing cheap, low-quality knockoffs. He gathered hundreds of executives in a German hotel and delivered a legendary 3-day speech where he famously commanded them to change everything except their wives and children. To prove he was serious, he later gathered 2,000 employees in a courtyard and piled up 150,000 defective mobile phones and fax machines, a fortune in hardware, and set them on fire. As the employees watched their hard work go up in flames, Lee made it clear that mediocrity was now a death sentence. This ruthless obsession with quality propelled Samsung Electronics to the top of the global market, eventually surpassing even Sony and challenging Apple. But this rise to power came with a heavy price for the South Korean public. As Samsung grew, it became too big to fail. The company's influence over the media, the judiciary, and the political elite became so pervasive that critics began to warn of a corporate takeover of democracy. The power of the Lee family is often described in terms usually reserved for royalty. In South Korea, the chairman of Samsung is often seen as more influential than the president. This became painfully clear during the massive political scandal in 2016 that led to the impeachment of the South Korean president. The investigation revealed a dark web of bribery and influence peddling between the government and the top brass of Samsung, aimed at ensuring a smooth transition of power within the Lee family. Even when the de facto leader, Lee Jae-young, was sentenced to prison, he was eventually released on parole because the government feared that his absence would hurt the national economy. This is the fundamental paradox of the Samsung state. The country is so dependent on the company's success that it cannot afford to hold its leaders to the same legal standards as ordinary citizens. When the chairman is sick, the national stock market trembles. When the company faces a downturn, the entire nation's credit rating is at risk. It is a golden cage. The corporation has provided the wealth and technology that turned South Korea into a global powerhouse. But it has also created a reality where the citizens are subjects of a corporate dynasty. This level of control extends to the culture of the workforce. Being a Samsung man or woman is a badge of prestige that comes with an almost military-like devotion. New recruits undergo rigorous training camps, where they learn the Samsung philosophy, singing company songs and participating in synchronized exercises. The loyalty expected is absolute. In exchange, they receive salaries and benefits that are the envy of the nation, creating a self-reinforcing cycle, where the brightest minds in the country are all funneled into the service of the 3 stars. But this concentration of talent and wealth creates a staggering divide between those inside the Samsung ecosystem and those left outside. The pressure to succeed is so immense that it has contributed to a national crisis of stress and low birth rates. As the cost of competing in a society dominated by a few massive giants becomes unsustainable for the average family. The venture history of Samsung is a testament to human ambition, showing how a destroyed nation can use a corporate engine to achieve a miracle. However, it also serves as a warning about the limits of that growth. When the line between a company and a country disappears, you are no longer just a citizen. You are a consumer in a closed loop. As we look toward the future, the Samsung state faces its greatest challenge. The world is changing, and the old model of the family-run conglomerate is under fire. Global competition in semiconductors and artificial intelligence is fiercer than ever, and a new generation of South Koreans is beginning to question the price of their prosperity. They wonder if a country can truly be free if its heartbeat is controlled by a single boardroom. Yet, every time you look at a skyscraper, see a massive ship on the horizon, or check the notification on your phone, you are seeing the shadow of the dynasty. Samsung is more than a brand. It is a monument to what happens when a company becomes the architect of a nation's soul. It is a story of incredible triumph and terrifying scale, a corporate empire that didn't just build products but built the very fabric of modern life for an entire people. Whether this model can survive the 21st century remains to be seen, but for now, the Republic of Samsung remains the most successful and perhaps the most dangerous experiment in corporate power the world has ever witnessed. The 3 stars continue to shine, but their light casts a very long shadow over the land they helped create.